to have that kind of transformative, you're never quite the same after it experience. And that's when you get bit by the bug. And you're still bit by the bug.
Yes, all these years later.
So what are you, I know I'm hopping around a bit, but what are you excited about now? Like if you think back to that first experience where you're on the subway and you're seeing visuals out of the side of your eye, what's giving you hallucinations now? What are you jazzed about?
So honestly, what I'm really excited about right now is still the transformative power in VR, and especially the transformative power in VR with regards to learning and training. And, you know, when someone like Kent Bai, who's seen like literally everything, says that the work that we did with Accenture for Avenues was like, you know, really moving for him, like that is incredible for me. I've had people go through Avenues, and I can talk more about what Avenues is.
Yeah, why don't you actually pause right now and describe what Avenues is, how it came to be, and how that relates to your overall business.
Yeah, so Avenues is a 15, 20, depending on sort of how you go through the experience, minute long voice-activated VR training for social workers. And the way it all sort of happened was Accenture came to us and they said, you know, the challenge that social workers face right now, or social work agencies are facing right now, is social workers, it takes a long time to train to be a social worker. And there's a really big staffing crisis. There's a lot of turnover. It's an incredibly hard job. It's underpaid. It's really just, I mean, the people that do it just are true believers.
Yeah.
Because it's like teaching elementary school or something. It's like you have to love it to do it, because you're certainly not getting paid that much, and it's very hard.
Yeah.
So, but it's something where people burn out a lot because it is so hard. So, you know, there's kind of this like training crisis in social work. So they wanted to sort of help social workers learn to ask really good questions more quickly, and also learn that how you ask the question really matters. And you have to read people's personalities to know how to ask them questions in order to get the best information. So we built this 20-minute long voice-activated VR experience. You go through a couple introductory scenes, but the bulk of the experience is you are asking questions of different members of this family. The gameplay is basically there's 3 questions on a table in front of you. They are all the same topic. They're all worded differently. You pick a question, you read it out loud. So it's all voice activated. And I'll talk a little bit more about that decision in a second. But you read out the question, you get an answer back from the family member. So you're basically having this long conversation with them. And at the end, based on the information you have to decide if you take the children into foster care or not.
Oh, wow.
The mother who's...
What a hard decision to make.
It's a really hard decision to make, because it's scripted very purposefully to be very, very nuanced. So there's like, we wrote it, and we worked with incredible people at Accenture and incredible script writers, and Kevin, who directed it, was awesome. And it was a really cool team effort, but it's written such that there is no easy answer. So at no point in the conversation does the child say like, oh, my mom hit me, because that's obviously an easy answer. Get the kid out of there. There are points during the conversation where you ask the child a question about, you know, bruising, and she looks down and says like, I don't want to talk about it. But that's open to interpretation. You know, she's a little kid, she's scared, child services in her house. You know, there's fighting, there's, you know, or it could be she doesn't want to talk about it because her mom or her mom's boyfriend was the one who hit her, right? So there's a lot of like gray area nuance in that. So that piece came out a year ago, and we've had like...
When you say came out, what does that mean in the context of a piece with you know, a specific purpose like this? So it's not like available to the general public, I assume, or is it?
It is not available to the general public. We have shown it at various different places. So we, you know, for Accenture, it was like an experiment. And I don't think anyone predicted that it would sort of get the attention that it got, which is really amazing. So it was released at a conference for sort of human services and social workers in Seattle last year. And it got a tremendous response. After that, it won an award inside Accenture. And then it was a finalist for a South by Innovation Award. So we demoed it at South by last year or earlier this year. Sorry, it's all blur. And it also won an award at Mobile World Congress. So
cool.
It's gotten,
Congrats.
thank you. It's gotten like really amazing attention and really great press. And the second chapter comes out next month. It'll be debuted at the same conference as last year. And like we worked on that as well. We were the agency on that again. Same director, same cast. And like, I can't wait for people to see it because it's even more like intense and emotional than the first one.
So is it covering the same thing, Child Protective Services, or is it another? I'm not actually familiar with Accenture as a company. Are they pretty broad in their?
Yeah, Accenture is like a giant, like 400,000 people consultancy that does literally everything. Like Accenture works with everyone on earth.
Interesting.
Like it's been really nuts to learn about it because I'd never worked with these huge consultancies before, and now we do a lot of work with different ones, and like they're great. They're great partners, wonderful to work with. It is like learning a whole new universe.
So is Avenues 2 covering a similar issue, or what's the okay?
So Avenues 1 is training social workers how to do initial family interviews. So get a sense of whether the home is safe or not.
Yeah.
Avenues 2 is specifically working on creating a safety plan. So the idea is you go back to the house, the children are still in the house, but they have identified, key issues that need to be quickly resolved in order to keep the children in the house.
Yeah.
So you have to work with the parents and make sure that you have a safety plan with them that they can stick to, that they're committed to, that they will take these steps and make these changes. And yeah, I mean, it's really, really an emotional piece. Like the stakes are really high. I mean, there's certain endings to the piece that like when we were filming, people were crying. Like it's really, I'm super excited for people to see it.
And where can people see it in our community? Because they're not going to be going to one of these conferences, I assume.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of a challenge. And I think that's a challenge in VR more broadly is like getting people to see things because this is a training tool. It's a little bit different. I mean, there's like video footage and there's promo videos of it that are online. They're on our site. They're on Accenture's site. I mean, if someone's in New York and they really are dying to see it, like give me a call. Shoot me an email, whatever. And it will probably also be screened other places. That's something that we're kind of working on with Accenture. So hopefully we'll screen it at South by again. Hopefully it'll maybe go to some festivals. So yeah, it'll be around. But I think that, that brings up a really good point is I hear I'm like, somebody be like, oh, look, this cool VR piece, blah, blah, blah. And then I'm like, great, how do I see it? And there's like, oh, there's one copy and it's in the company's building lobby in Sweden. And it's like, cool, So,
yeah.
So yeah, this is, I mean, again, if someone's in New York and they really want to see it and experience it, like shoot me an email, whatever.
Okay. Well, I definitely will.
Yeah.
Are we going to see you at any other events? Like, are you going to Venice?
I'm not going to Venice, unfortunately. I wish I was, but
what are you going to next? So we can know where to reach out to you.
I'm going to OC6.
Okay, great. I'll see you there.
OC6. I'm going to XRS Week, which is in.
Never heard of that.
So that's Greenlight Insights. They do a bunch of research, and they're like a research firm. So they have an event called XRS Week. It's in San Francisco. I'm speaking there on October. I want to say 17.
Okay,
18,
cool.
Mid-October. So I'll be there. I'll be in San Francisco then. I might be speaking at another event that's like a women's event around then too. Those are the big ones. There's like I'm in New York. I mean, I live in New York, so I'm in New York a lot, and I do a lot of the events in New York, and I go to a lot of the events in New York. So if any of the like R Lab stuff, I'm at a lot of those. AR Kit, which just happened last week or earlier this week. Like I love that meetup. That's such a good meetup. Yeah, most of the New York events, like I'm kind of around if I'm in town.
I want to get back to understanding. I've got a lot of different questions I want to dig into around agency work because I think there's a lot of people that are creators that do a mixture of their own work, but also do some contracting work, some agency work.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, like, if you could go over just like the business side of running an agency, how you've managed to get your clients, like what advice you could give for other people that are trying to get contract work. Like how does that, and how has it shifted? Like, where are we at right now with that? Like, is enterprise, agency stuff where it's at right now? Or have you noticed, a change in the mood for AR and VR and a change in the appetite?
So we are primarily enterprise at this point. Our AR stuff with Coke we do, and that's really fun, but it's really tough to, as you obviously know, to get sort of artsy VR projects funded. Like that's a really hard thing. So one thing that I'm really happy that we've been able to do is like someone like Kevin Cornish or Gabo Aurora directed a piece for us recently. Like we can pay these people who do sort of amazing projects on their own to do stuff that maybe isn't as like artsy or whatever, but that can then fund their artwork. So that's one of the things that I'd really like to continue to grow, is working with these directors, getting them these really good projects that can then, fund their other work or pay their rent or whatever. And it's, it's interesting stuff for them to work on, and it's interesting challenges for them. And, we've been really happy with the directors we've worked with, and they're super awesome. So yeah, I mean, in terms of getting clients, it's been kind of a crazy mix of just, word of mouth and running into people. And it's almost never like linear. It's a lot of like, I meet someone 5 times and then don't hear from them for 6 months. And then they call me and they're like, we need something tomorrow. I'm like, oh, okay, that's not quite how it works. Cool. It's completely, if there was a formula, I would be doing it, but there's not a formula.
So you've been doing this for 3-4 years now. What has the sort of like, can you give me a temperature check? Like how have the companies that you've been pitching, what have they been interested in? What are they interested in now? Like what's sort of the thing that you found the most success pitching clients on, or is it all over the map? Is there not like any discernible signal?
I think the training stuff is what everyone's buying right now.
Okay.
And I feel like, it goes in spurts. It's very feast or famine.
Yeah.
I have been shocked over the course of the last couple of weeks how much stuff has come in. Like I was honestly expecting August to be dead. I was very, kind of just like, okay, August is going to be a wash. Like it's going to suck, but I'll get through it. And the first week in August was pretty dead. And then I think what's happening is, honestly, a lot of companies are getting their sort of end of year budgets, or they're doing their like budget planning right now.
I've seen this too. I mean, I'm like enterprise sales and like selling to companies. It's a relatively new thing to me. Like I never did it before.
Yeah.
But we go out for, a lot of like sponsoring events and such. And there's these big companies always seem to have these end of year budgets where each department head will have like a little bit of money. And they're like, if I don't spend this money by the end of the year, they're going to think that I don't need as much money next year. So everyone's incentivized to push it out. So you're in that channel right now, trying to mine that end of your financing.
We are taking that cash. And yeah, that's great. So, I mean, really in the last couple of weeks, we've had one thing get funded. We've had another thing that looks very positive. A couple other things have come through, and yeah, I mean, I'm super excited for this fall. Ask me in December how I feel. I might say something different, but I might be just like catatonic.
So as a company, are you doubling down on these training videos? You feel like that's where the money is at the moment?
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean,
and that's mostly VR or AR, or it doesn't matter. VR. It's like context specific. Okay. VR.
Well, what we've done has been mostly VR. If somebody came to us and said, make an AR training for XYZ, we could do it. We would do it. But it's been a lot of VR training stuff. And I think that, that to me is a pretty wide open space. Certainly there are other players in it, but there's not many. And it's like, this is something that I see obviously I'm biased, but I see this space really revving up. I think much like personal computers were in the 80s, VR is going to be the type of thing people have in their workplace, and then eventually they have it in their home. So I think if we...
So enterprise broadly, you feel like is a smart place to be in at the moment.
Yeah, I think so. And I'm really excited about it. I think that, you know, the thing that I like most about what I do is the sort of creative problem solving challenges. So it's really having somebody give you like a problem and using the confines of VR and or AR, but coming up with a solution within that is like the most fun thing for me. Like I could do it all day, and I do it most days, which is great.
Yeah. I mean, that's the creative process in general, right? It's, I mean, I think that's why everyone who's in a creative field sticks with it, even though it's, you know,
nightmare,
art, entertainment. Yeah. All these things, whether it's movie making or VR or music, like all those things there's better ways to make money if you're just trying to make money, but it's so satisfying to untangle that puzzle. And at the end of, you know, that was a mixed metaphor, untangle that ball of yarn, find the puzzle piece, like put that together. And at the end of it, there's this sense of satisfaction that I've never gotten from anything else. But it is, it's a funny business to be in. It makes no sense, but makes all the kinds of sense at the same time.
It's a crazy business, and it's really fun to do stuff that hasn't been done before.
Yeah.
Because it's so wide open. There's no templates. I mean, obviously there are technical limitations, and some things you just physically cannot do. But beyond that, it's like you can basically just build what you want. And I mean, obviously we have budget constraints as well, but I think that also makes it interesting because we do have constraints put on us, right? Budget constraints, stuff we're trying to teach, you know. And one of the really important things for us, like, so as an agency, we have core principles, which I'll just talk about for a quick second. And one of our biggest core principles is we build for the least technical person in the room. And that's so important for enterprise. Like I cannot even begin to, and what shocks me is how few people understand that. Because to me,
so what do you mean when you say that? Like the experience when it's finished ought to be something that someone without any technical knowledge could get into? Yes.
So I don't like the controllers. I don't like the clickers. I don't like the remotes. There are remotes I like better than others, right? The Vive controllers. I mean, no offense to anyone at Vive who might be watching or listening to this, but dude, come on. Like, not good. Even the controller on the Oculus Go, which is much more simple, I don't like. And I'm not a gamer. I never, ever was a gamer. I was not allowed to have a video game system as a child. My parents like made me read books.
Oh, my parents did the same thing too.
Yeah.
I couldn't have squirt guns either. I could only have squirt guns that were in the shape of animals.
No, I had guns. I mean, I grew up around guns, but I had squirt guns. But I did not have video games ever. And at a certain point, I sort of just didn't ever play video games. So, you know, that's not an intuitive behavior for me.
Yeah.
So, and for a lot of people, right? So, you know, here's the thing. I do a lot of VR, not as much as Kenpai, but I do a lot. And I cannot tell you the amount of times I've gotten into a demo, someone puts the headset on me, and they say, okay, now take the remote, now click here, now do this, now toggle up, now teleport here, now hit this button, no, the other button. And I take off the headset and I'm like, no. And I've had a couple people be like, do you know how to use VR? And I'm like...
You're probably the best tester then because you're so sensitive to that stuff. People who are, you know, have been brought up on video games, and that's very, you know, comfortable to them, forget how bewildering that can be. You know, there's a lot of different options, a lot of different buttons that you could fumble into. So you try to make your experiences something that minimize those complexity and stick to just the headset.
Yes. So,
and voice, like you mentioned in Avenues, it's a voice because that's one of the most intuitive
behavior. Yep. So I've shown Avenues to hundreds, if not thousands of people in the year that it's been out. I showed Avenues to my parents who are, my parents are not technical at all, like really not technical at all. And they were able to do Avenues and get it immediately. Because I was just like, read this thing and get the answer, read this thing and get the answer. And, watching my parents go through avenues and get it, and like some of their friends went through it and they got it, like that was the most exciting thing for me, because our audience is not, I'm not built, like when you build for enterprise, you're not building for technical people. When you build games, that's a whole other thing. When you build games, you're building for people that know how to do gaming things.
Yeah.
When you build for enterprise, you're building for people they've never put on a headset before. They, they're not technical. They don't know how to use the remotes. They feel probably pretty uncomfortable in this weird headset. Like, why am I in this weird freaking thing that I've never seen before? Mm-hmm. So as long as you make everything else really intuitive and really easy to use, then they're going to be set. So, that's, again, how we really approach it is, so, we approach it by making it very intuitive, making the immersion as unbroken as possible. So another thing that I've seen in training VR that I hate is quizzes. Okay. So I've seen training VR pieces that start off really strong. There was one that I saw, and I wasn't supposed to see it. A little birdie showed it to me, so I can't say too much about it, but it starts off really strong. It's really scary. It's to train you for a scary experience. And so it starts off like with a scare. And I was like, this is good. Okay. And then the screen goes blank, and you've got 3 options in front of you, and you use the remote to click an option.
Okay, that takes you out of it.
It takes you completely out of it. I think there's like a children's cartoon show that does that to you, right? Like I don't have children, so maybe somebody with children would know, but somebody was like,
I have a kid, but he's too young for TV.
Okay, that's good.
It's 13 months. We're trying to keep all screens away from him.
Except for VR.
Except for VR, in which he's in 24/7. He's never actually seen us. He just has a headset on.
Exactly. Dude, kids in VR and AR is great, by the way. Like my niece and nephew are 7 and 5, and watching them use VR and AR is like awesome because they get it so intuitively.
That's
and they're super into it. Yeah, it's really
that bodes well for the industry.
It does. But anyway, so like
maybe not for humanity, but for the industry. Who cares about humanity? I just want VR to be a thing. Anyways,
VR is going to take us out of our burning world. So anyway, so the quiz thing is very jarring, and it's also not how the world works. I mean, it would be great if every time you were faced with like a difficult choice or something that was scary happening to you, you got to like pause and click on a quiz and click on this, like, but that's not how it works. You have to respond in the moment, in real time. So it's like, that's a core principle of ours, where we don't break the immersion, or we break it as little as possible.
Oh, that's lovely. Yeah. Keeping you in that experience, because for training, like you just said, that's probably, because most things you'd be training for, you can't pause and sort of take that option. You have to be more fluid.
Exactly.
You sound like you know your stuff, Cortney. I'm impressed. If I were a company, can I have a VR experience for you to like train me how to be like a better person or a better CEO? Like,
we're working.
Is this the training simulation right now? Are we in one of your VR things? And this has just been like a 36-year-long training session.
Yes, we're actually in VR right now. I mean, the other thing we do is like we don't use avatars. Okay. So that's also not realistic. So I've seen other pieces where you are using avatars, and that gets you deep in the uncanny valley.
So you do mostly live action with sort of branching narrative-y kind of things?
We use real people. We use mostly theater actors because they tend to be the best in VR. And we're represented by CAA, so they've been super great in terms of like, we can call them and be like, hey, we got this person. So that's super awesome.
And that is how you talk to CAA, by the way. Like, if anyone on the line that's wondering, you just call them and be like, hey, is it possible to get this, like, maybe? And then every now and then it happens. It's pretty amazing. But you have to have that voice. You've got to come with very like, maybe?
No, I mean, like, we've never had celebrities, but we've had really good like up and coming actors, which is great. And there's
just people that can act in VR. That's a very rare thing.
People can act in VR, very rare. We've been super lucky to find really awesome people. So the problem with using avatars is that it's not real.
Yeah.
Right. So the trick is like, that's the same problem with training in person. Like if you were doing, so a lot of times, like for social workers, for example, you do simulations with like your teachers or your classmates because you cannot like ethically just go out into the field and talk to people whose families are in crisis. Like that's not possible or okay. But the issue is like you and I could be doing a role play where you are playing like, the father of an abused kid, but I know you're you, right? Yeah. And I know that's not the case. So even we can practice, whereas using VR with real people, it really does trick your brain. So I've had people come out of the Avenues experience like crying, which is amazing. I'm like,
It's
oh,
always
yeah,
good to make people cry.
I know, I'm so excited. Yeah, I love it. I you know, because it's like an emotional piece, and
Because you're an evil person.
no, sometimes. No, because it's like that's. But the amount of
No, it shows that you've got this hardwire into people's emotions. I mean, that is one of the superpowers of VR, is that it hits people in the emotional gut center really hard.
Yeah,
and you can take advantage of that.
And like I've had people come out of the experience, multiple people, and be like, "Oh my God, what happened to that little girl? Is she okay?"
Yeah.
And I sort of have to say to them, "She's an actress. She's really nice. I met her mom. Her mom is super nice." Like, you know, people get really concerned.
Yeah.
And that's awesome. And that's really the power of this stuff, is it's not just like, we've worked on concepting VR pieces for training that's like, here's how you climb a telephone pole, here's how you clean a fridge, here's how you blah, blah, blah. And that stuff is great. And I would love to work on more stuff like that. I think it's really exciting. There's a lot of design challenges there from sort of an interaction perspective. But the emotional stuff is really what's super interesting, because it's like, how do you design a piece that is moving and is going to stick with people, but is also not going to freak them out too much? So, you know, I had someone approach me a couple of weeks ago and say, we want to do an active shooter piece in VR, like active shooter training in VR. And that gave me a lot of pause, because I was like, well, the last thing I want to do is do something that just terrifies people, because I taught at NYU for a while. We had to do active shooter trainings as part of being an adjunct at NYU. And like, that's terrifying. My sister teaches elementary school right outside Portland, actually, and she's had to do active shooter trainings with her students. Like, and the thought
I hate that kids have to think about that stuff.
No,
anybody has to.
Yeah, the thought of that just like makes me sick, and it really, really traumatizes the kids, because you know, they go home and they're scared and they're crying, and they don't, you know, they're too young to process it. And with adults, obviously, it's a little different, but because VR is so visceral and your emotions are so heightened, like, I don't want to do something where people just like have nightmares. So I'm trying to think, like, if we were to do this, how could we do something that is scary? Sure, it's a scary situation, but like also empowering. So how do you create a simulation where it's like, yeah, it's a terrifying situation, but also, can you learn something?
Well, and I guess that's what, with all these training things, it seems like the outcome would be the same, is that at the end you'd feel more prepared.
Yeah.
Right. So even if it's a scary thing, like, you know, having to make the determination of whether to take a child away from a parent, very scary, or an active shooter, you know, maybe at the end, hopefully you'd feel a little less scared because you feel prepared.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So this is really fascinating. And it sounds like, I mean, when you speak about this, you're speaking with a lot of passion. And this is I know that there's a couple other companies that are working in the training space. Do you feel like you have any interest in building like a more broad platform? And you said at the beginning that you're you know, you're client based, but it seems like you're learning so much, and this is such a you know, your take on all of this is really fascinating. It feels like there's an opportunity to build like a, you know, some platform that you could replicate for each of these different scenarios, maybe easier rather than doing bespoke. You ever think about that?
I have, and there's a couple different, you know, things that I think about when people mention that to me, because it's definitely something people have mentioned and I've thought about. And I don't want to get boxed in.
Yeah.
Because I feel like
building a product is a huge investment. I mean, like with Kaleidoscope, it's been like, I'd like disappeared for a year. And if you get it wrong, you know, you've wasted that time.
Exactly. I don't want to raise money. I mean, you know, I raised it. Yeah, it sounds terrible. I you know, I had a small friends and family around when I first started, and that was basically like my husband and my dad. And they just sort of, you know, and that was it. And that like they've been paid back at this point, because I just needed someone as I was first starting to be like, okay, cool, you can skip
take work off. And
So we're profitable. We've been profitable since last year.
That's awesome. My hat is off to you. It's a new thing. I did this a couple shows ago. I like it. Whenever I get really excited, I'm going to wear a hat and I'm going to wait for something to happen in the interview. The hat came off.
I feel like there should be
That's awesome. Profitability.
Wear hats in this thing.
Just so they can say, my hat is off to you and actually have a hat to take off.
Yes. Oh, I should have worn a hat. Damn it.
But that's huge props. Well, I haven't done anything worth having your hat taken off for yet. I mean, you could take your hat off for yourself, but that would be a little egotistical.
Yeah. I mean, listen, when I say we're profitable, I mean, we're not in the
You're making more money than you cost to operate. Hey, I think that's, I mean, everyone that I talk to, whether you're an artist or running an agency or a studio or a startup, like we all need to be cockroaches right now because the industry isn't, giant. It's still a very small. And I think a lot of us were able to get by in previous years because it was a hype cycle and there's so much speculative capital. But now we need to provide real service, real value. And, I think profitability and keeping costs down should be where everyone's at, because if you can figure out your business in this environment, whenever we get that next wave of growth, which will happen, you'll be ideally positioned. So don't die, be a cockroach, be profitable like Cortney.
Exactly. My really good friend has this thing that he says to me, which is like, what is it? Have fun, work hard, don't die or something. And I'm like, that sounds about right. But yeah, I mean, and we are super, super, super lean. And that's something that, while it's not fun because that means that I am working all the time. What that also means is that like we can keep going pretty much forever. So,
as long as you don't give up.
As long as I don't give up. So like I've seen, I have seen some shops, and you've seen them, where, they grew really quickly and people got really excited, and all of a sudden everyone's like an executive this and an executive that and getting paid a lot of money, and there's all this VC money coming in. That's in VR and AR right now, like very unsustainable. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a scary place to be.
I know like a handful of folks that are doing okay with that. Like Felix and Paul seem to be doing really well and doing great work.
Well, they've got stability. I mean, that's the nice thing about the government systems they have in Canada, France, Luxembourg, Taiwan.
Everywhere that's not
you can depend on it. Just as long as it's not chaotic, you can sort of build a business around it. But people in the States and countries that don't have that or have access to it, it's much harder. You've got to be extra scrappy and extra like. Whenever you have a revenue stream, you can't always count on it, or you have to be, you have to be really smart about figuring out, is this a recurable revenue stream that I can count on, or is this, cyclical or a one-off, and don't build your business until you really have something that is repeatable and reliable.
Absolutely. And it's very, and I think, I don't remember if we were talking about this on mic or before, but, a lot of people sort of got into it at the top of the hype cycle and have since kind of disappeared. And, I think that's really what separates the people who are sort of true believers from the people that were just sort of in it because it was cool. And
the tourists, nobody likes the tourists.
I mean, look, I've had friends who've worked in VR, and a very close friend of mine worked in VR for a couple of years and loved it and is incredibly talented. But at a certain point, he was like, I just have to pay rent. Yeah,
because that's the other thing. It's like, I think some people left it just because they're like, it's the next big thing. Let's get into it. And they didn't really care about it. And then when it was like, let's see you later. But then there's other people that love it and want to be working in this industry and haven't been able to find a way to make it work financially. And that's the stuff that, that's what keeps me up at night, honestly, is because, Kaleidoscope is all about trying to provide opportunities and to connect artists with the people in the industry that are in a position to help them stay afloat and make work. And I know that there's a lot of people that are having to exit the industry, not because they want to, but because they can't figure out how to financially make it work. And that's a shame, because the industry needs all those people.
Exactly.
We need artists, we need creators, because they're the ones that will get the flywheel turning of finding something like Beat Saber that really connects with a large, group of people and can pull in a bigger audience. And once you have more people that actually have the headsets, whether it's an enterprise or consumer, then more developers can make experiences that, they have a bigger audience to sell to. And that's a feedback loop that once you get going, is hard to stop and is in a very positive direction. So we need those people to stay. So on that topic, like having friends leave like that, like what could we be doing to help people like your buddy stick around? Well, like how can we keep them from exiting?
I mean, what I'm trying to do with him is hire him back. That's
a good thing to do.
Yeah. I mean, like I would like to, part of, I think if there's a through line that runs through my career, which is very, very varied, it is, I like to work with really creative people and help them get ahead. So as a journalist at Billboard, I did that when I was writing about bands that I liked and helping explain the music industry. When I worked for the music startups, it was really sort of like these people were building really interesting creative projects and products, and how could I help them get a bigger audience? And now with VR, it's me looking at people like directors and producers and just really smart, cool, creative people and saying, okay, how can I work with you? How can I get you work? And, look, like Gabo's a genius. I'm sure Gabo would rather be doing something like amazing, groundbreaking in a refugee camp rather than directing a training video for sort of corporate inclusion. But he did it. He did an awesome job at it. He directed an amazing piece. And, that's what can then help fund his next trip to Palestine or whatever.
Yeah.
So that's what I really wanted. And, the training stuff doesn't have to be boring. Like I want to.
No, I mean, again, Kent loved this experience and everything that you've talked about sounds like artists would have a lot to not only add to making the experiences, but a lot that they could learn from watching them.
Yeah. I mean, I want to make the training stuff less boring. Like that.
We should do some sort of like event, conference, showcase, bringing together the best work in sort of this enterprise space.
Yeah,
I think that would be super interesting. You want to do that?
Yeah, I'd love to. Let's do it.
Okay, you heard it here first.
I have nothing else to do.
Okay, well, what would be the focus? The focus would be
my poor long-suffering husband, who like never sees me, is going to come home tonight. And I'll be like, "Hey, guess what?" He's like, "Stop."
Yeah. I feel like I'm in constant tension with being a good CEO, founder of a company person, a good dad, and a good husband. Like those roles.
It's so hard.
It's so hard. And then like forget about being like a good friend or like, there's like, good human. Yeah.
It's like it is
so
hard.
It's so hard to juggle those things.
It's like I mean, yeah.
The monastic life has a great deal of appeal to me because you've got such like focus and dedication to one thing. You don't have that tension. I often fantasize about well, not that I ever would, I love my kid and my wife a whole lot, but it's hard to juggle that. It's hard to figure that out. But anyways, it's who we are, and you're going to do this. Yeah. And that's another thing I wanted to talk to you about. Well, and I don't know if anyone would find this of interest, but it's, I've got you on the line and I want to talk about it. So we're going to talk about it. What do you think Kaleidoscope could do that would help drum up more business for agencies like yourself and for ultimately, work for artists, work for hire? Like what could, we're trying to build this professional network that brings the industry together. What could we be doing? What should I be doing that would make your life easier, that would help get you more clients, that would help you hire more artists?
Oh God. So I will so here's one thing I'll kind of say.
I'm going to take notes in case you have.
So a big challenge in VR right now is okay, so I went to AWE. I didn't go this last year because I had a family commitment, but I went the year before. And what is very frustrating about events like AWE, and this is not a slam against the organizers who I know and like, and I think do great work, events that are very VR focused tend to be very insular and very circular and very much like, let's all talk about how great we are.
Yeah.
And that's fun.
A lot of back patting.
A lot of back patting. I mean, there's a not so nice term that I use to describe it, but I won't.
I think it has a circle and maybe a jerk in it.
Maybe. I won't be gross. I'll be good. But, you know, and again, like that stuff is fun. I like those events. I like a lot of those people. It is really fun to see them and hang out and be like, let's talk about amazing stuff, because it's great. The problem is, once you get out of that little circle, you have a lot of people that just like don't know anything about VR. And our challenge, and I think the challenge for VR in the next couple of years, is how do we broaden the circle? And how do we not just sort of get stuck in this pattern where we all kind of like a herd go to the same events and talk about how awesome we are and everything's so great and we're so technical and look at this cool stuff, but it never quite translates. So my goal, and what I try to do more and more is, and again, I go to a lot of these VR events. I like them. I like the people. It's fun. I learn a lot. I learn a lot about new technology, which is really good for me. But I have found more and more going to events that are like HR training conference days or whatever. They're for some reason always like in Orlando, right? So they're not as like fun and glamorous, but that's where my audience is. And that's where the people who are like, oh, I never knew about this. I never thought about this. That's where they're at. So the one thing that everyone in VR can do is really think about, how do we reach the people, right? So I had this great experience yesterday. I was telling my colleague about this before I got on the phone with you. So we partner with a lot of people in the training space. And this guy that we've been partnering with, who does a lot of education and curriculum and training, was kind enough to mention us in his newsletter yesterday. He sent out a big newsletter about, you know, what we're doing and how we can work together, and really lovely of him. Awesome. And I was very, very thrilled with it. So I had a couple of people get in touch with me, and one was people that make like faucets. And this guy reached out and he was like, oh, I've thought about VR a little bit. I think it's really cool. We should talk. And that was exciting because, you know, business, but also like it's reaching those people. It's reaching the dude who works at like the faucet company and having him say like, oh, I've heard about this. This is cool. How can we do something? It's reaching the people who are, you know, working at the steel mill, working at the, you know, working in these big companies who aren't technical, who might have never thought about VR. Maybe they think VR is just for games or just for kids, and showing them how this stuff can actually be used for them, how it's deployable, how it's scalable. I think we as an industry have done a very bad job at that. I start to see things changing. Oculus has actually done a lot with Oculus for Enterprise. That's exciting. The Walmart investment has been great. Super thrilled about that. But I still don't see as much sort of external outreach and education as I would like to. And I've been really, really trying to get more people to go out and talk to these big companies because, you know, that's again where I think a lot of the funding is going to come from. And that's how things are going to get started.
So for our event, we need to bring in those people at a steel mill or a faucet company, right? Like that should be the goal, is to open it up to all sorts of people that would never go or attend or think about this kind of stuff. Could we do it as an online event, or do you think we need to have it as a physical event? Do these people need to be there to see it on their headset, or there's always that tension, like you can get them to turn a computer on so much easier than fly, but you don't get them to be in a headset.
You don't get them in a headset. And that's, you know what, I've had so many calls and meetings with people who are sort of like, oh yeah, maybe. And then I get to them and I put a headset on them, and that's the switch. That's the flip. That's the thing that changes. And do
you think you could get them to come to an event? Do you think that would be possible, or do you have to go to them?
Yeah. Depending on, I think it depends on where the event is. I think it could be co-located within a larger event that people are already going to, because that seems like much easier to do.
And would it be one of these like boring like faucet conventions that you do like a enterprise component of? They have faucet conventions. They should. I would actually go to a faucet convention.
I'm sure they do. I think it would be fascinating. I don't know anything about faucets. I think I'd learn a lot. Like I'd probably learn way more at that convention. No, I mean, there's like, diversity and inclusion, human resource training, like those type of conferences. So I think this would be co-located within one of those because you've already got everyone there, and then all you have to do is just like redirect them. But I think sort of beyond that, one thing that we do, and I'll plug this because I think it's a program that is useful for a lot of people that we do. So one of our biggest challenges, right, is VR is not cheap. You know this, I know this. People that make it know this. VR is expensive. There are different price points, and we've done stuff at very different price points, and we can work on the creative within different price points. That said, like 10 grand doesn't get you anything. It just doesn't.
Yeah, it's I mean, I wouldn't even pick up the phone for 10 grand.
I don't get out of bed for 10 grand.
I don't even say the word 10 grand for less than 10 grand.
Exactly. So anyway, so we were having a challenge with that because, people were like, what are we paying all this money for? So we have something which I'm excited about called the VR AR Jumpstart. And the Jumpstart is 5 days. We embed in your office. We can do it remote if we have to, but we much prefer to be in someone's office. And it's basically day one is like defining the problem. Because a lot of times, I mean, I've had this any number of times happen to me. Oh, we want to do VR. Okay, what do you want to do? Oh, training in VR. Well, what do you want to train for? Right? Or they want to do something that doesn't really work in VR, or they want to do something that is not the best. Right? So like day one is like, okay, really, what do you want to do? Define the problem, get it set. Day two is the creative. So day two, it's like, what are we going to build? How are we going to solve the problem? We write a script. We, really come up with all that. Day three, we make a prototype.
Oh, wow.
And again, it's a rough prototype. So we have 360 cameras. We'll put a 360 camera in your conference room and we'll film you. And, if you've got people on your team that did high school theater, they can come be part of it. It's really fun. So, or we build this prototype like in Unity, or we have other prototyping tools if that's the direction we want to go. Day three is the prototype. Very rough. Day four, we clean up the prototype. So we like auto stitch, and if there's interactions, we actually can't build them in that amount of time. We can dummy them in. So if there's voice interactivity, like we'll put in cards to read, even though the voice interactivity actually doesn't work. Okay.
Yeah.
And day five, we user test. So the company is responsible for recruiting a handful of user testers. They come in, we put them through the experience, we take notes, we get the feedback, and that's it. So we leave you, so we leave you with a rough prototype that you can show to your boss and user feedback. So that actually has helped us sell in more projects, because
that's a great little pearl for anybody that's in. I think that play would work with almost any enterprise sale. Right? I don't know what you're charging for that, but it's probably at a price point that you're not going to have to like go too far up the chain of command to get approval.
So we did a bunch of research and talked to big companies, and we're like, what is the amount that generally, every company varies, but we kind of came up with an average of like, your boss is going to have to say okay to this, but you're not going to have to go through like procurement, right?
Yeah, I'm guessing it's somewhere between the 5 and 10K range.
It's more than that because we have two people.
Okay.
We have two people, and we're leaving you with a product.
Yeah.
But it's not crazy expensive. It's not the type of thing where you're going to have to go through multiple layers of bureaucracy to get it approved.
Yeah.
And you actually get something tangible out of it. And that facilitates a lot more sales because like your boss can see something. Because I think a challenge right now is a lot of companies don't have a model, right? So it's not like you're a faucet company. I'm just going to keep talking about this faucet company. It's on my mind, right? So it's not like, oh, we're the faucet company. Here's the faucet training that our competitor did. We want to make a version of this, except better because we want it to be custom for us, and we want to right. So like
not like you're selling a faster, cheaper widget and they're already buying widgets. It's like you're selling, a magical something else that they don't have a framework for.
Exactly. So that's where we really can help a lot of people is like, okay, this is what we can do. Because it's, we demo our stuff a lot and we demo other things a lot and we have a lot of stuff that we like, but there's not much out there.
Yeah.
Right. And I think a lot of the publicly available VR stuff is great, right? It's cool. But if I'm an enterprise and I just go to a VR arcade, or if I just buy an Oculus Go and download a bunch of stuff, like I'm not seeing anything that is really applicable to me. So that's kind of how we are solving some of those problems, is really getting people. Yeah.
Well, I feel like I've gotten a huge amount of insight into where enterprise sales. I'm way more excited about training VR stuff. It seems to be in the. I've heard about it a lot over the last couple of weeks. I've had like 3 different touch points where people have brought that up to me.
Yeah.
So it's I'm really glad that we dove into that, and I want to do something that
let's do it.
If that's a hotspot, I want to try to put some extra fuel on it, because again, anything that's going to be hiring artists and creators to do things and to help them stay in the industry, stay creative, keep honing their craft, I'm like 100,000% on board for. So let's get all those companies that are spending money on training stuff to do these VR training.
Give it to us, and we'll give it to the artists.
Yeah,
we'll make some real trippy. I feel like, and I know we're wrapping up, but I feel like there have been points throughout history where really amazing artists have been hired by like ad agencies or training companies. Like, I don't think this is necessarily a new thing.
Oh, right? No, definitely, yeah.
But it's super exciting to be like, I don't know, like what could Eliza McNitt do with like a training video for like a, how to give HR feedback, right?
Yeah.
Like, that would be. I'd love to see that. That would be crazy. I love videos. It's totally different.
It would definitely be in outer space. Yeah, and there'd be some beautiful narrator whispering in your ear.
Yes, I would like that very much. But yeah, I mean, it's like, how do you take these creative, interesting people and put their vision onto something and make it really good? Because at the end of the day, like a lot of training sucks. It's boring. I mean, I've done these corporate training videos when I worked corporate jobs, and they were just terrible. Right? They're just terrible. You don't learn anything. So like, how can we make stuff where you actually like learn stuff and enjoy it? That's the
well, the next time I see you, I want to see all your stuff. I'm really, I'm surprisingly excited about your work.
Oh,
it sounds really good. That sounds really good. I know, what a backhanded compliment. But to your point, training videos, right? Like it's, you're going to have to fight against people thinking that they're boring by default.
We try to make them interesting.
Yeah. Well, you're an interesting person, and I'm really glad you spent an hour with me. I feel like we could keep chatting for a lot longer. We have a couple of people on the line. I'm just going to give them an opportunity. If there's anything in particular that you wanted to ask Cortney, now's your time. Mike and Eric, jump in. I'll give you a moment as I look up who we're interviewing next week. So if you don't get any questions in the next few moments, your opportunity will have closed. So we're speaking with Jorgen Geerds on Monday and Noah Nelson on Tuesday. And then the rest of the week, we're taking off for Venice. So definitely tune in on Monday. Jorgen has been running Concept VR for a really long time. They have done a million productions, and he's an absolute sweetheart. And Noah Nelson, of course, runs No Proscenium, which is a great publication covering all things immersive. So you should have a sort of a good counterpoint to Kent's interview yesterday. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to the forum. Thank you, Cortney, for being here and joining me.
All right. Bye.
All right. See you later. Bye.